On a cold May morning in 1932, Stockholm witnessed one of the most disturbing and bizarre murders in Swedish criminal history. The case became known as the Atlas Vampire, not because the killer drank blood, but because of the horrifying condition in which the victim's body was found. The victim, Lilly Lindeström, May 4, 1932. Lilly Lindeström was a 32-year-old sex worker living in a modest apartment in the Atlas area of Stockholm. She was known to be cautious, selective about her clients, and generally well-liked by neighbors. She lived alone and kept to herself, trying to earn enough to eventually leave the profession. On the night of May 3rd, neighbors heard nothing unusual from her apartment. No screams, no sounds of struggle, no disturbance whatsoever. The horrifying discovery. May 4th, 1932. Morning. When Lilly failed to meet a friend as planned, concern grew. Her door was found unlocked, unusual for someone in her profession who was always careful about security. Inside, investigators found a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. What they found. Lilly's naked body lay face down on her bed. She had been bludgeoned to death with a blunt object. But here's what made this case legendary. Her body had been drained of blood. A ladle and bowl were found nearby, covered in blood. The killer had apparently used these tools to scoop blood from her body. Evidence suggested the killer had spent considerable time with the corpse after death. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry or struggle. Lilly let her killer in willingly. The crime scene investigation. Swedish police were baffled by several disturbing details. The blood. Most of Lilly's blood was missing from the scene. The amount collected in the bowl couldn't account for all of it. Where did the rest go? Did the killer take it? Drink it? The time spent. Based on the crime scene, the killer had remained in the apartment for hours after the murder, calmly collecting blood while Lilly's body lay on the bed. No forced entry. This meant Lilly knew her killer, or at least felt comfortable enough to let them inside. Was it a client? A friend? Someone she trusted? The ladle. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence. The killer had either brought the ladle or found it in Lilly's kitchen and decided to use it for this macabre purpose. This suggested premeditation, or at minimum, a disturbing calmness after the murder. The investigation begins. Stockholm police launched one of the most intensive investigations in Swedish history at that time. They interviewed Lilly's regular clients, those brave enough to admit it, neighbors in the building, other sex workers who knew her, friends and acquaintances. What they learned. Lilly had mentioned meeting a new client a few days before her death. She'd told a friend this client was strange but paid well. Several neighbors reported seeing a well-dressed man entering her building the night of the murder. The man was described as middle-aged in a dark suit and hat, common attire for the era, making him virtually untraceable. The prime suspect, the medical student. Investigators became interested in a medical student who had been seen in the Atlas area around the time of the murder. Why he fit? He had anatomical knowledge, suggested by the methodical blood collection, was known to frequent prostitutes, had been seen near Lilly's building, had access to medical equipment and knowledge of blood handling, and disappeared from Stockholm shortly after the murder. Police tracked him to Germany, where he was studying. When questioned, he had an alibi. He claimed to have been at the university library the night of the murder. Several witnesses corroborated this, though the timeline was fuzzy. Without concrete evidence, Swedish authorities couldn't extradite or charge him. He remained a suspect, but was never prosecuted. Other theories. Theory 1. The ritualistic killer. Some investigators believed the blood collection had ritualistic or occult purposes. The 1930s saw interest in various mystical practices. Could the killer have been someone who believed in blood magic or vampirism? Theory 2. The medical practitioner. The methodical nature of the blood collection suggested someone with medical or butchery knowledge. Could it have been a doctor, nurse, or veterinarian conducting some sort of twisted experiment? Theory 3. The jealous client. Perhaps this was a crime of passion by a regular client who had become obsessed with Lilly. The blood collection could have been a bizarre way of keeping part of her. Theory 4. The accidental discovery. Some theorized the killer might have murdered Lilly in a moment of rage, then, perhaps due to mental illness, became fixated on the blood afterward. The collection might not have been premeditated, but rather a disturbing compulsion that emerged after the murder. The media sensation. The Swedish press had a field day with the case. Headlines screamed, "Atlas vampire drains victim dry. Bloodsucker stalks Stockholm. Modern Dracula murders woman." The vampire angle, though not technically accurate, there was no evidence the killer drank the blood, stuck. The case became known internationally as the Atlas vampire murder. This media frenzy had consequences. It created public panic about a vampire killer on the loose. It forced sex workers to work in groups for safety. And it led to increased police presence in the Atlas district, generating hundreds of false tips and confessions.
The strange confessions. As with many sensational cases, numerous people confessed to being the Atlas vampire. The asylum patient. A man in a psychiatric hospital claimed he'd killed Lilly to acquire her life force through her blood. He provided details that weren't public knowledge, but investigation revealed he'd been institutionalized months before the murder. The alcoholic drifter. A homeless man confessed in 1934, saying he'd killed her during a robbery gone wrong. His confession fell apart when we couldn't explain the blood collection or provide any verifiable details. The anonymous letters. Police received several letters from someone claiming to be the killer, describing the murder in disturbing detail. However, all the information in the letters had already been published in newspapers. The writer was never identified. Why was the blood taken? This remains the case's central mystery. Investigators proposed several explanations. Medical purposes. Could someone have needed human blood for transfusions or experiments? In 1932, blood banking was still primitive in Sweden. Consumption. The most disturbing theory, did the killer drink it? No evidence supported this, but the public believed it. Trophy keeping. Serial killers often keep souvenirs. Perhaps the blood itself was the trophy. Occult ritual. Some believed the blood was used in mystical ceremonies. Mental illness. The killer might have suffered from clinical vampirism, Renfield syndrome, a rare psychiatric condition where individuals are compelled to consume blood. Sale. A dark theory suggested the blood might have been sold on a black market for medical or occult purposes. The case goes cold. By 1935, with no new leads and the medical student alibi holding up, the investigation stalled. Why it remained unsolved. No forensic technology like DNA testing existed. Fingerprinting was primitive in Sweden at the time. No murder weapon was ever found. The killer left no usable physical evidence. Witness descriptions were too vague to identify anyone specific. The case officially went cold, though it was never closed. Modern investigation attempts. 1990s. Swedish cold case detectives reviewed the file using modern criminal profiling. Their profile suggested male, 25 to 45 years old, likely had medical or anatomical knowledge, possibly suffered from a paraphilia or psychosexual disorder, organized and methodical personality, probably knew the victim or had observed her routine. 2000s. Researchers attempted to locate any preserved evidence for DNA testing. Unfortunately, most physical evidence from the case had been destroyed or lost in the intervening decades. 2010s. True crime investigators tried to trace the medical student suspect's later life. They discovered he died in 1968 in Germany. No evidence ever linked him definitively to Lilly's murder. Similar cases in Europe. Interestingly, several murders with similar characteristics occurred in Europe around this same period. Dusseldorf, Germany. In 1929, Peter Kürten, the vampire of Dusseldorf, murdered multiple victims and drank their blood. He was caught and executed in 1931, before Lilly's murder, ruling him out. London, in 1933. A prostitute was found murdered with blood collected in jars. The case was never solved. Was this the same killer who had moved from Stockholm? Prague, in 1934, another sex worker found dead with evidence of blood collection, again, unsolved. Could these cases be connected? Or was this a period when multiple killers with similar compulsions were active? The psychological profile. Modern forensic psychologists who've studied the case believe the killer likely suffered from clinical vampirism, or Renfield syndrome, a rare psychiatric disorder where individuals feel compelled to consume blood, often starting with animals before progressing to humans. Necrophilia. The amount of time spent with the body suggested possible sexual attraction to corpses. Obsessive-compulsive disorder. The methodical blood collection indicated ritualistic behavior patterns. Possible psychotic break. The bizarre nature of the crime might indicate someone experiencing a mental health crisis or break from reality. The legacy. The Atlas vampire case had lasting effects on Swedish society. Law enforcement. Led to improved forensic training and evidence collection in Sweden. Sex worker safety. Prompted discussions about protection and rights for sex workers. Public fascination. Became part of Stockholm's dark folklore, inspiring books, films, and urban legends. Criminology. Studied in criminal psychology courses as an example of bizarre paraphilic murder. The apartment today. The building where Lilly Lindeström was murdered still stands in Stockholm's Atlas area. Current residents report nothing unusual, and most don't know about the building's dark history. The apartment itself has been renovated multiple times. No memorial marks the location. Lilly, like many victims of unsolved crimes, has been largely forgotten by history. Unanswered questions. Who was the killer? Almost certainly someone with medical knowledge, but beyond that, we may never know. What happened to the blood? This remains one of criminology's most bizarre mysteries. Was it consumed, used in rituals, kept as a trophy, sold? Why Lilly? Was she specifically targeted, or was she simply unlucky? Did the killer know her personally, or was she a random victim? Did the killer strike again? The similar European murders suggest possibly yes, but no definitive connections were ever established. Is evidence still hidden somewhere? Some researchers believe case files might exist in forgotten archives, potentially containing information that could solve the case even now. The final mystery. The Atlas vampire case remains officially unsolved. Unlike many cold cases that have potential solutions, this one seems destined to remain a mystery forever. The victim, Lilly Lindeström, a young woman trying to survive in 1930s Stockholm, brutally murdered in her own home. The killer, unknown, unnamed, unpunished, possibly dead now, having lived a full life after committing this horrific crime. The motive? Still debated by criminologists. Vampirism, occult ritual, psychosexual disorder, or something even stranger we can't comprehend. Epilogue: The vampire that never was. Despite its nickname, the Atlas vampire case probably had nothing to do with actual vampirism in the supernatural sense. It was likely the work of a deeply disturbed individual with a blood fetish or mental illness. But the name stuck because it captured something dark about the human imagination. Our fear that monsters might be real, that they might walk among us wearing human faces. In 1932 Stockholm, for at least one night, a monster did walk among them, and no one ever caught him.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out, so subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you.